I'm excited to welcome this week's Tiara Talk Show guests, the creative team of Food Rocks, and they are going to introduce themselves to you.
Hi, my name is George Wilkins, and I was the musical director on Food Rocks way back when.
Hi, this is Ken, and I was the lighting designer for Food Rocks.
Hi, this is Valerie Johnson-Redrow, and I worked to help with as a media producer. My job on Food Rocks was more to line up the potential talent, get the songs published, the information on publishing done, and convince the celebrity singers to be involved in our project.
And I'm Jim Steinmeyer, and I was the writer on Food Rocks.
I'm so glad we can have you guys on the show. I've told all of you, but this is one of my personal favorites when I was a kid. I just adored this show. Came out in 1994, and I'd seen it a few years later. And maybe some people might not remember Food Rocks if you had not been there since 2004, 2005, since it was replaced by Soarin' in EPCOT at the Land Pavilion. So how would you all describe what Food Rocks is for somebody who had never gotten to experience it?
I never saw the show. I only recorded it. But I never got to. I've seen artwork on it and everything, but never got to see it. So my only opinion would be from the audio angle, and I thought it was amazing.
It was it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to produce and to do, and it was part of EPCOT renewals. EPCOT had been open 10 years at that time. And the contracts came up, and the contracts were being swapped from one corporation to the other. And so that involved changing shows. So there was a show that was there called Kitchen Cabaret. And Kitchen Cabaret was an animated show of kind of 30s and 40s cabaret style songs about food and nutrition. And two things had happened in that 10 years. And a bunch of things that happened, one of which is we had a new sponsor. It went from a Kraft to Nestle. The other thing that happened is that the messages about food and nutrition had changed quite a bit in those 10 years about the food pyramid and what we were supposed to be eating. And then we wanted to dust off Kitchen Cabaret, and Rolly Crump was the executive producer of the EPCOT renewal show, that pavilion for Nestle. And Rolly and I went down and looked at it, and Kitchen Cabaret had been running 10 years. But we kind of walked out saying, and Rolly was so smart and so practical about everything he did. And we said, it's really a good show. It's just that it's a cabaret show, and no one in this audience, has sat through a 40s show, including us, So we said, let's just modernize the show. Let's get new characters. Let's do rock music. Let's do a rock concert. And bring it all up to speed with new messages and new songs and a new cast. And so that's what it was. It was a rock concert about good nutrition, and it was all parody songs. And in some cases, it was the real artists doing their one-off songs.
Jim, I did the original Kitchen Cabaret,
right,
with Buddy Baker and Exitencio and a few other people.
And they were really amazing animated characters because they were really fantastic cartoonish characters because they were food. And in fact, we kept a couple of the characters. Couple of them were redone. I know the milk carton ended up in both shows.
Right.
We redressed it, and then there were a couple others that we reskinned. In other words, we used some of the mechanics for them. But they were really fantastic and fun and cartoonish, and that was part of the fun of it. It was inventing these characters. And the original Cabaret was a really good example of the show because it had really efficient messages. The songs were fun. It was just about kind of bringing that style of song up to date now with a rock concert.
And I don't mean to sound silly here, but I didn't realize that it was more so paying tribute to Live Aid from 1985 with the thought of the backing. The story was about good nutrition. So I didn't realize that until I did a little bit more digging. I don't know why I never put the two together. Where did that idea come from? Like, who thought of that? Because it's so clever. I love it.
I don't know. I don't actually, I have to be honest with you, I don't remember ever talking about Live Aid. But you have to understand that what that means is exactly what you're saying. In the early 90s, when we were working on this, it meant that, all of that was in the zeitgeist. The idea of bringing different stars together for a benefit concert, for a big story, that was all something we'd just been through. So I don't know that it was pointed particularly at Live Aid, but I think that was an idea that we were all conscious of at the time.
From a lighting design perspective, it's the first time that we had ever actually done a rock concert inside, a Disney park. The show came up just at the time that automated fixtures were going to be available for corporations and companies to own. Up until this time, all automated fixtures were proprietary and owned by the folks that manufactured them. And just as Food Rocks was coming of age, a company worked out a deal where Disney could essentially buy the fixtures through a long-term lease. So we had fixtures available to us that had never been available before, which played perfectly into the rock concert perspective. I should also give credit. There were two other members of the team who were critical to the success of the rock concert vibe. First is Abby Rosen-Holmes, who was my partner on the show, who has crazy credentials as a lighting designer for its huge high power talent. She was working with me at Imagineering, and Ira Lichtman, who worked for R&D. At the same time we were creating this show, we were also creating a brand new proprietary Disney lighting console. So that was all being developed at the same time. So Abby and I would be programming the show, and we get to a point where we either crashed the software or needed new features. We'd call Ira, he'd come in, we'd go to dinner, he'd write more code, we'd come back, we'd program some more, and we really just leapfrogged between development and programming time and really worked our way through it. One of the other pieces we specified two kinds of lights. There was a wash light that looked kind of like a giant coffee can that waved around and changed color. And then we had a fixture that was a spotlight, the fixture that did all the patterns and stuff in the show. And it turns out at the time of the show, the spotlight version had not yet become available. So the company who we leased the lights from went back into their archives and found the very first version of a moving light they ever made. And these are the moving lights that were first built for Genesis rock tour, where moving lights were first ever used in a show. So we programmed the show on this first generation of light, waiting for the state-of-the-art version to become available. So we really programmed the show twice. First with this great original hardware from the 80s, and then when the other fixture became available, we came back in and installed the new fixtures and cleaned up the programming. But it was great to be using, Genesis original light fixtures in Food Rocks for us in EPCOT. It truly was amazing. And one of the great things, if you remember the start of the show, all the lights around the drapery were all waving in the air and changing all kinds of crazy colors. It was a perfect way to start the rock concert. But what happened was we were programming the show and we crashed the console. And when the console crashed, that's what the console started doing with those lights. And we're like, hey, wait, that's the perfect way to start the show. So we let it run for a little while so we could remember what it did. And then we went off to dinner. Ira fixed it. We came back and then programmed all that crazy waving and color changing at the start of the show, but only a happy accident because we were busy crashing the console. We also, because it was food based, were able to do great gobos. Great custom gobos, and gobos are the patterns that go in the spotlights that make the patterns on the stage. You'll remember there was a spoon and a fork pattern. There was one we loved most was an orange. So we were sitting in our office one day. Oh, we need a fruit gobo. So Abby got up. There was an orange slice in her to go lunch from the Big D of Imagineering. We slapped it on the Xerox machine. Xerox literally a slice of orange. Then scanned that and sent that off. So that orange gobo that you see is literally a photocopy of an orange that was in our lunch one day. So we had a lot of fun working on this show as well.
I mean, one of the great things about it was how, as Ken said, how like true to the form it was. How the music was really true to those songs. How the lighting design was really true to a rock concert. I mean, there was a little parody in all of it because it was, a 25-foot stage. You know, it was the tiniest rock concert you ever saw. And, of course, it was also all these cartoon characters. But, the lighting effects were every bit what you would have seen in a concert at that time. The way that they were programmed, the way they swept across the stage, the way they introduced each song. Our team drew on all of that, and they had experience with all of that. And of course, George had done every kind of music on earth by then. So I remember feeling incredibly guilty partway through this process because we had to do so many test songs to get artists to sign up. We probably did 8 or 10 songs for each one that was used to demonstrate to the artist what it would sound like. And I remember early on, George being in some meeting or we were recording something, and I felt terribly guilty that we were putting George through this. And finally, we were in some conversation. He said, "This is a lot of fun because we get to actually go through and figure out what all these riffs are in these famous songs, and I'm having a blast doing this." And I thought, well, thank heavens, this is actually fun for him because otherwise this would be just a drag. Having to recreate all these songs.
Well, I remember when we did this Pointer Sisters, and I got Marty McCall to put together 4 of the greatest chicks in town to do it. Mm-hmm. And I remember Eisner saying, "Well, what the hell do we need the Pointer Sisters for? This is great." And the Pointer Sisters came in and just tore it up. I mean, as great as the demo was, they made it twice as good. They were amazing.
Clever things about the show was then if you looked at the writing and, instead of the Beach Boys, it's the Peach Boys, it's the Refrigerator Police, it's, Food Rapper. It was so much fun to pitch these people because these original names that they would be given, kind of were very charming, and it got them excited about the show as well.
So was it difficult to put together a story plot when basically it really is supposed to be about the talent that's in the show, but you can't guarantee that until you have them sign on the dotted line. So was that a difficult process? Because I know, Valerie, you were reaching out to the talent during that time.
Yeah, we did go through quite a few artists that didn't make it in, but I think the key was, we pitched them. For example, Tina Turner, we wanted to be Tina Tuna. And so her song was going to be What's Meat Got to Do with It. So I took her, and I'm trying to remember, Jim, did you come to that dinner?
No, I wasn't along. Valerie ran. Now that was a social thing, Valerie. You ran into her, didn't you, at a party?
Oh no, you're right. I did. I think I had a connection, and I said, look, I took her to Spago, I was at a Spago dinner with her. I actually don't remember how I got there with her. I thought it was a Disney thing, but I was sitting next to her all night at dinner at Spago, had this wonderful evening, and then I pitched it, and she listened, and then at the end of the conversation, she said, "I really like you." And I like the show idea. I like the thing. I want to say yes. She goes, but it's a little too corny for me. I thought, food, that's related. It's too corny, but can we come up with a song for that? Anyway, I did. I pitched her What's Meat Got to Do with It. And she had sparkle in her eyes, but not enough. But we had interesting meetings. We brought in Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. I think they came into WDI. I remember sitting at a meeting with them.
Yeah.
I think some of the people got a little greedy, right? Where their managers got involved. It was sometimes difficult to get through the manager to the talent. I know that we tried really hard to get Elvis Parsley, but his estate was just too difficult to deal with. And then when we got Tone Loc to come in, you liked him so much, right, that he became the host of the show.
He became the host of the show, yeah.
I don't think we'd planned for that, but some of the artists just were very accessible. And even Sting, I think that he re-recorded for us. At least we talked about it, him doing Every Cake You Bake instead of Every Breath You Take.
Every bite you take. Every bite you take. But
every bite you take.
As I recall, the Police sailed through pretty agreeably, but I don't think he ever did the recording. He certainly didn't from the beginning.
No, Joe Hamilton, can't think of his name now. Harnell did the Sting voice.
The sound alike. Okay, he was really
Jesse
good.
Harnell, yeah.
Yeah.
George brought in an unbelievable. The sound-alikes were unbelievable on that show.
Yeah.
And I don't know where. Well, I do. I know George has just done everything with these people, but we would get these people marched in, and we'd listen to it, and we'd go, "Oh my gosh, this is unbelievable! This is just they were the most amazing voices," and we would do that to demonstrate. Our little dog and pony show was to do a song, record it, first class, the instrumentation, everything, and a sound alike. And then play that for the artist and say, would you agree to be part of this? And so we were doing a bunch of those songs to try and impress people. When you say the Elvis Presley estate and Tina Turner and all those people, all of those had songs. We did all those songs because we had them ready to play for them or to send to them and say, this is what we're going to do. So it was a big operation for a long time to try and get people to sign on to it.
Right, and those who did, right, had a great understanding and a great attitude about the whole thing. My understanding about Sting is that he listened to his sound alike and he was ready to do it, and then said it sounds as good as anything I would do, and said, go ahead and go with sound alike.
I think that's right. Peter Gabriel, I remember, did exactly the same thing. We had a sound alike for Peter Gabriel. It was amazing. Yeah. And Peter was ready to do it, and at the end said, yeah, you know what, it's fine. The other guy like that, I remember, Neil Sedaka. Neil Sedaka came in to do it. Neil Sedaka agreed to do it and came in to do Vegetables Are Good For You instead of Breaking Up Is Hard to Do. And his wife was his agent at that time. And his wife said, you better plan a long session because Neil does all the parts. Neil did, George, 8 different voices in that. He did all the harmonies and he did it himself. And she said, you better be ready because Neil is a perfectionist and he'll want to do all the harmonies. And we had the voice talent in, and we had done the demo, and we brought Neil Sedaka in, and I think he did 2 parts. And he said, you know what, your voice talent is fantastic. Just use that for the harmonies. So once again, he did the principal part and then left the rest for us. So.
Right. He had so much fun. I remember that was the fun part with these artists, even wanting to outdo themselves,
yep.
And honoring their original song. They were just thrilled. I
remember Little Richard coming in and going, man, I can't sing that high.
He also, I just was thinking of this because he just died a few weeks ago. He kept muffing the lyrics because, of course, he had sang Tutti Frutti with his own lyrics for 50 years? And of course, we handed him a sheet with new lyrics on it. So he had a hard time singing it because he was on autopilot. He'd been doing it, every night for 50 years. But he was fantastic, really amazing.
Yeah. My kids loved him. So since Food Rocks was the last piece of this, the renewal of the land pavilion, we were really done with all construction. The show was installed and we were just programming away. And it was at a time where my kids came in while Dad was programming the show, and my daughter was 2, and she knew him as they called him Pineapple Guy. And they sat in and watched this program. And, my daughter now is a producer at Imagineering on the Tokyo portfolio. And it's because she's grown up, in this world. But they had the greatest time watching that show come together. And what's so great about talking about all the acts that didn't get in the show is that is the quintessential Imagineering process, right? You start in blue sky with pie in the sky ideas for a crazy show, and then as you work on that over the years, right, budgets and schedules and all the things change the way a show finally gets delivered. But at the end of the day, what you have is an amazing cohesive show that seems to make perfect sense, right? And as we talk about all the artists that we pitched and weren't there, at the end of the day, the cast that was in that theater was the cast that needed to be in that theater, and those songs were powerful.
Yeah, adults loved them. Yeah. They all knew the oldies but goodies, and Cher was still a big talent at the time. And does anybody remember Cher recorded it, but didn't she send us the tracks, or did she actually come in?
My memory is that she didn't.
Gloria didn't
actually record it.
She didn't, because I have a signed autograph of her sitting on a motorcycle picture from that. But then I can't tell when I listen to the recording if she really did it or not. I thought she recorded something and sent it in, but I think you're right. You guys know.
George, I think we had a fantastic sound alike for her, didn't we?
That was Gloria Bellis.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't tell the difference. So all the people in the audience, all the adults really thought it was all the original voices, and then the kids got the fun lyrics. So it was really.
I heard a fantastic story from our attorneys about Cher. The deal, and we weren't. None of us. I mean, Valerie was a little bit, because Valerie, was the supervising all this stuff, but none of us were actually involved in making the deals, because that's the lawyers department. And what they used to do is they would promise them other things. They would say, well, we'll give you passes to the park, and we'll give you some merchandise certificates, and we'll do this and we'll do that. And the story was that Cher held out for everything. Cher, when Cher was offered 4 annual passes to the park for a year, she said, make them for the length of the attraction, and don't make them 4, make them 10. And I want this and I want that. And she just held their feet to the fire for every little thing she could get. And at the very end, she said, okay, and I'm going to donate all that to a children's charity.
So why didn't she record it then?
It's very hard to say. A lot of people were busy at the time.
Scheduling issues sometimes.
They had scheduling issues, and of course they would have had to come through or do it remotely. And then I just have to say, credit to George, and you can hear these when I say sound alike, and he instantly gives us the name of the person who did it. The recordings were really fantastic, and there were a number of these people like Neil Sedaka and Peter Gabriel who were ready to do it all, and then listened to the recording and said, you know what, they're doing it as well as I would do it. Just use it.
And we didn't re-record every single thing, right? I'm talking about the instrumentals. We got original tracks.
That's right.
Times, right? Yeah.
The track of Bohemian Rhapsody that you hear in Food Rocks is the original Bohemian Rhapsody. There was a day when those tapes arrived at WDI, and they were the original tracks. That's right. And I still get a chill when I think about it. They put them on the player, and we got to we got to listen to all the different tracks and all the different takes of Bohemian Rhapsody. So yeah, some of them, they actually were able to use authentic tracks.
What about the actual waiting section? Did you guys help design that in preparation for people to go into the theater? Because I just remember it being so much fun. It was like a food nutrition playground, and the boxes that you would open, and they had different scents in them, and you would, little food facts on the wall and on these little machines and things. It was so much fun. So did you guys play a part in creating that too?
Yeah, that was all Imagineering's work. We re-envisioned the holding area and the entranceway, and did all those great food fun facts and the scent boxes, and that was all part of the scope for reimagining Kitchen Cabaret into Food Rocks. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
I was involved a little bit with the pre-show area, but I wasn't primarily the writer of that. Credit really goes to Rolly Crumb for putting all that together so efficiently, and someone we haven't mentioned, Rennie Rao. Rennie Rao was the stylist for that, and she's an artist at Imagineering, and she has a very distinctive, incredible cartoon style. And Rolly made her the stylist for that whole area, which meant the characters, the pre-show area, the sets, everything. And that's how he had done things originally when he was involved in projects like Small World, is that it was done with a stylist so that everything had a unified look. And that was part of that pre-show area, is that Rennie was deeply involved in that pre-show, all the elements of that pre-show area, as well as the show itself. So that really, the credit goes to her for the distinctive look of all of that.
Did you guys keep any mementos from the attraction, or is there anything that you remember that you still have from that time period?
Yeah, I still have the original set of the original gobos for all the fixtures, and of course videotapes of us programming it and the first few versions of the show. None of that, of course, has been transferred off of videotape, but yeah, and those moving lights are still in our inventory. When Food Rocks closed, we transferred all those lights to the Tiki Room, because the Tiki Room at Magic Kingdom also had those very same fixtures. So those became spares for that. And then when we reimagined Tiki Room, those fixtures all came back to Imagineering in Glendale. So we have a whole series of moving lights that are painted like tiki pieces, and then some that are the standard flat black. So those fixtures are still lovingly hanging around Imagineering today.
All I have are old documents that have like the status of the legal situation, so that would be boring.
Yeah,
but
I did find our programming tapes for Food Rock, so I have transferred from the cassette programming tapes. And have digital copies of all that original music that we used to program to. So it is nice to have your own private soundtrack to Food Rocks.
Yeah, I have a DAT of the show. I also have a picture of me and the Pointer Sisters.
George, I want to see that. You got to send it.
Okay.
There was a little tragedy in the middle of the show.
Oh no!
Do you guys remember Ken Lisi?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Ken Lisi ran the recording studio at Walt Disney Imagineering, and he was killed during the time that the show was being put together. It was a horrible family tragedy. And the original version of the show, you talked about, the original Cher and her hair being redone. The original version of the show, the narrator says, "Hello, Orlando," which was our little parody of a rock concert. And that was from the original rough track. And Ken Lisi did that. Ken had a great radio announcer voice. And so, of course, as people do when a track is put together like that, they jump in and do the lines that we don't have ready for the talent. And so Ken did "Hello, Orlando" and did the opening of Food Rocks and announced the show and etc. And when the whole show was finished, we were all unbelievably saddened by what happened to Ken as we were doing the show. When the whole show was finished, we played it for an executive, I won't say who. And the executive's note was, it doesn't make sense to say Orlando. We should say Walt Disney World. Just re-record that. And I went to my boss, Barry Braverman, and Rolly Crump, of course, and I said, I'm not going to change that because that's Ken. And I want Ken to introduce the show. And so we didn't change it. So for about a year, that show said, "Hello, Orlando," which was the parody of every rock concert, that starts by naming the city. And about a year into it, I remember being told, yeah, they changed it. They, when they went back and redid some mixes, they went back and re-recorded it and said, "Hello, Walt Disney World." So you'll hear, I think most of them online say, "Hello, Walt Disney World. Welcome to the concert for good nutrition." But the original one was Ken doing it, and he said, "Hello, Orlando." He ran the recording studio at Imagineering. Right. So he had his fingers in everything that came through there with sound. George, you must have worked with him a jillion times. Right? A
jillion. Well, like I say, Ken was a dear buddy of mine. And he was in charge of everything.
Yeah.
He and Glenn Barker.
Right.
I think
Yeah, he
Glenn
worked
really,
on like Body Wars. I worked with him really closely on Body Wars when that opened, and then he worked on Superstar Television, just as helping us doing tracks to play in the background for that live show. But all the original record. Anyway, he worked on everything.
Yeah, he actually used to do theater. Neighborhood theater stuff.
Right.
So, which he loved to do, which was so unlike Ken. If you knew Ken, all of a sudden be a character,
Yeah.
His legacy lives on through a couple of the projects. It sounds like some of them are still around, which is great to hear. I'm going to have to find, if I can find any video footage of the original audio track of that opening. I'd love to hear it myself, because the only one I knew was the one that they had dubbed over later on. When you're talking about the design for this project, how long did it take to kind of craft a visual of each character to make it seem similar to their counterpart, but then also, have like it be its own creation too?
Well, that really was the work of Rennie and Rowley. Rowley left that to Rennie to style, but I remember. See, when you mentioned the Pineapple and Little Richard, what I remember was when Little Richard agreed to do it. Then the meeting started about what this character would be, and of course the whole thing about a pineapple. He was singing about fruit, tutti frutti, but the whole thing about a pineapple was that it matched his kind of bouffant hair. The spikes of the pineapple. So all of those things were all tied up as to what you were looking for, what the combination was. Cher was a very slinky fish, kind of, in a net. And of course, that all matched her image of at the time. And of course, that all fit perfectly. So once the recording artist had agreed to do the show, then they tried to match that in terms of a visual and in terms of a character.
Like you put the mustache on Little Richard too, and his.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
When he came into the studio, he handed out Bibles to everybody.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
That's right.
And speaking of Little Richard, he had passed away this year, and we just recently lost Bonnie Pointer, one of the Pointer sisters.
Yeah.
So, and you guys had great experiences working with them, it sounds like.
I still have an original little cassette that I had of, I think, the originals that we put together for pitching.
The lyrics and the music are so much fun with this entire show. Do either of you have a favorite specific track from the show that you just love?
Not really. Although I do think the Beach Boys was a great vocal.
Yeah, the thing is, you fall in love with every piece of the show, right? Yeah. You start out, with your favorite songs early on, but then when you're in the space, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week playing this stuff, you really just really fall in love with all of it. I mean, the opening, the Peter Gabriel, as soon as you hear the first 3 or 4 notes of all those classic songs, it just brings it all back, right? And so really, at the end of the day, as a team member, you love everybody who's in the show.
We had a guy named Aaron Richards who, he was I'm not quite sure what his title was, but I worked with Aaron a lot, and he was always like the guy that hires the composer that, then stays in the booth and everything. Anyway, when we were talking about Sting, he wanted to make sure that the drum was the right sound. So we brought in Greg Bassinet, who is one of the great studio drummers in town, and we must have worked on that drum set for 2 hours, 3 hours, miking it, making sure the snare sounded just like, Sting's snare and everything. And I kind of was laughing at it, and then we ended up using a drum machine on that track. We ended up using the recording we had made and triggering a drum machine. put
Wow,
on
you
there.
recreated. I thought that was original. When I would listen to it, I always thought we got tracks to that. So you did
No,
all
that was
new tracks. Wow.
we did that track, and like I say, Aaron was so concerned about the snare sound, and anyway, we ended up using a drum machine after 3 hours in the studio playing it. So.
I think part of the fun of that show was that it would have been easy and fun to do 50s and 60s rock, to do Little Richard and kind of stop at the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
But that show opened with Tone Loc, and it opened with the Police and Peter Gabriel, and at that time, those were the people touring in the biggest rock shows.
Right.
So it really was a range of everything. You had really fun classics that we did parodies of, but you were also parodying songs that you were hearing on the radio right at that time. Right. So it really was a fantastic mixture, and I think that's what appealed to everybody.
Well, Jim, you ought to take a lot of credit for that, because you wrote a great show, man.
Well, it was a lot of fun to do, and it was constantly a challenge.
Yeah.
And,
who's in? Who's out? Who's in? Who's out?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel bad because there's such a love for kitchen cabaret, which I totally understand. The music's gorgeous and wonderful. And again, George worked on it. And I think a lot of people don't realize George worked on this project too. And I don't feel like Food Rocks usually gets the love it deserves, in my opinion. And so I really do appreciate you guys being on the show today to talk about it and all of these stories, because there really is no information. I just really appreciate all of you being on the show and creating this particular production of Food Rocks, because it played such a wonderful part to my childhood. And I think a lot of people forget that some kids were introduced to these classic songs because of this show. And just know that it has a special place in a lot of people's hearts.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I wrote Junk. I composed that. Jim, did you write the lyrics to that?
I did.
Okay, good.
That's right. I actually think I think that was the reason that Paul Stanley, I think that the Kiss, we were trying to get Kiss to be the bad guys.
Right.
And I think that was what the offer was on the table, was that Kiss would be the bad guys. And I think that fell apart early on, because I remember coming to some meeting with George and Rowley, and we said, no, let's just do our own song for that. By now we've done all the classic songs. Let's write exactly what we want for that song.
Yeah.
And so I did lyrics, which I was completely unqualified to be doing at that point, writing original lyrics. And I got them to George, and George very, very politely and professionally said, I'm having trouble scanning these, which is a code word. That's what musicians say, saying you wrote something that I can't actually set notes to exactly right. And of course, George had already suggested the slight fix. If you change this word to this, I think it'll scan better. And I went, you betcha, because he had done everything in the world by then. And so George did the lyric. That was a completely original song with new lyrics, and George did the music for it. And Junk was the only real complete song that wasn't inspired by anything else in that show.
Is there anything each of you would like to say to the fans of the show before we close out?
I'm excited that the fan base is still active and that the show still has an important place in people's hearts. I've got a programmer who works for me at Imagineering, who is the programmer who programmed all of the World of Color at DCA, lights, fountains, the whole bit. And we were talking about I was going to be on your show. He's like, oh, Food Rocks. I sat in that show as a child and couldn't believe that I was in a rock concert in a Disney theme park. And then he grows up to be arguably one of the best lighting programmers that is working today. So to see the impact that it's had on my peers and it's just spectacular.
I would say, we all grew up, lionizing the classic Disney. The classic Disney attractions. And they all seem so unbelievably magical, and they all seem so, inescape, you couldn't approach them because they were so fantastic and so magical. And what you realize working there and doing something like Food Rocks is, oh, this is the formula. They get really, really talented people and they kind of let them do it. And sometimes that used to happen there, and sometimes it didn't effectively. But I would say that was the lesson I learned from Food Rocks. Rolly put together an unbelievable group, and then kind of said, "You guys do it." And that was so inspiring. And of course, that's the story you hear over and over and over again with all those attractions. That's actually how that happened.
Yeah. And Rolly, I say, was fantastic, as you say. He put a team together and let you run with it. And if he disagreed with you, he would. And if you had enough passion, he would still let you run with it. But tell you that he was going to come after you if it didn't work out like you promised it would.
Right.
And that was a great relationship, right? And for Rolly, who did the first pavilion, right? So he was back finishing things he never got to finish on opening day. So for him, the whole renewal of Land Pavilion was just a crazy act of love. And it was great to hear him and hear his stories about creating the first attraction in the pavilion in the first place. So he was as fantastic as the rumors had him to be. He was nothing but a pleasure, and I feel blessed to be able to have worked with him on this show.
Yep.
Same here.
And that was my first time working with that group, with Jim and with Rolly and Barry Braverman. And it's just a tribute to like the quality of the show, where you're not so dependent on one specific character, right? You try to get these titles in, and if one didn't work, boom, you moved on, and it even got better. Because that happened a lot on Superstar Television as well. We had to go through and get rights to all these TV shows from the past. And I was a producer on that one. And it never got, you always rose above, right? And that's a tribute to just a good quality written show.
I really appreciate you guys being a part of this. This has been so much fun. And here's to another 20 years of Food Rocks and fans, and choose before you chew.
Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
We're waiting in the kitchen for you. Keep it low.